Some nights of babysitting are exactly what you expect. Cartoons on low volume, bedtime stories, and waiting for the parents to come home. But every once in a while, you step into a house that feels a little too quiet. A house where the child isn't the one who's scared. A house where certain doors stay locked for a reason, and where the baby monitor keeps turning on, even when the baby is fast asleep. Tonight's stories are about babysitters who thought they were just helping out for a few hours until they realized something else was awake in the house with them. Before we begin, Midnight members, where are you watching or listening from tonight? Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoy true horror stories like these, please consider liking the video, sharing it with someone who loves a good scare, and subscribing to the channel. Your support truly helps keep Mr. Bones' Midnight Society going and allows me to bring you more stories like this. Welcome to Mr. Bones' Midnight Society, Episode 11. Now, let the nightmares begin. This happened back in 2009 when I was 17 years old and a senior in high school. I didn't have a car yet, and babysitting was one of the few ways I could make money without relying on rides or begging my parents for gas cash. I'd been babysitting since middle school. Neighbors, family friends, coworkers' kids. Nothing fancy. Just dinner, cartoons, bedtime, and waiting for parents to come home. That night was supposed to be no different. It was a Friday evening, early fall. The kind of night that still felt warm enough to leave the windows cracked, but quiet enough that the neighborhood seemed to settle early. I was babysitting for a woman named Karen, a single mom who lived about 10 minutes away from my house. She had a 6-year-old daughter named Emily. Emily was polite, soft-spoken, and well-behaved. I'd watched her a few times before. She liked coloring books and board games and watching the same animated movie on repeat. She wasn't the kind of kid who got into things or asked a million questions. Karen was running late when I arrived, rushing around the house with her purse already on her shoulder. She apologized more than once, which I remember because parents who apologize usually mean it. "I'll be back before midnight," she said, kneeling to Emily's level. "Be good for her, okay?" Emily nodded without looking up from her dolls. Karen smiled at me, relieved. She already ate. She can stay up a little later than usual. Just nothing scary on TV, I promised, even though that was obvious. Karen hesitated at the door, like she wanted to say something else. Then she shook her head, smiled again, and left. The house felt quiet after she was gone. Not eerie, just quiet in that familiar, lived-in way. Lamps on, TV humming softly, a faint smell of laundry detergent and dinner. Emily played on the floor in the living room while I sat on the couch, scrolling on my phone and half watching her build little scenes with her dolls. That's when I noticed she wasn't playing alone. At first, it was subtle. She'd pause mid-sentence, like she was listening to someone. She'd tilt her head slightly and smile. Then she'd respond. "Yes," she said once. "No, not like that," another time. "Hold on," she whispered, giggling. I looked up from my phone. "Who are you talking to?" I asked casually. Emily didn't look at me. She adjusted one of the dolls and said, "He's helping me." I smiled, the way you smile at kids when they say kid things. "Oh yeah? Who's he?" She shrugged. "He's just here." Something about the way she said it made me pause. Not dramatic, Not spooky, just matter of fact. I laughed softly. Okay. I brushed it off immediately. Kids talk to imaginary friends all the time, especially only children. But after that, I started noticing things. The hallway light flickered once, just a blink, easy to miss. I told myself it was old wiring. Emily didn't react. She kept playing, occasionally glancing toward the hallway like someone was standing there watching. A few minutes later, one of the lamps dimmed slightly, then returned to normal. I stood up and tapped the switch. "Everything okay?" I asked Emily. She nodded. "He doesn't like it bright." I felt a small chill crawl up my arms. "Who doesn't?" I asked. She looked at me then, eyes calm, almost curious. "The man." My stomach tightened, but again I brushed it off. "All right," I said lightly. "Let's pick a movie." I put on one of her favorites and sat beside her on the couch. She curled up next to me, relaxed, completely at ease. I wasn't. I kept noticing the house, the way sounds felt slightly delayed, the way the hallway looked darker than the rest of the house, even with the light on. The way I kept thinking someone was just out of sight. I checked my phone. 9:14 p.m. Karen wouldn't be home for hours. That's when I called my boyfriend. Not because I was terrified. Not yet. Just unsettled. "Can you come over?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I'm babysitting and the house is kind of creeping me out." He laughed. "You're 17. Everything creeps you out." "I'm serious," I said. "Just come hang out. Please?" He agreed, still amused. Said he'd be there in 15 minutes. The moment I hung up, the lights flickered again. This time, it wasn't subtle. The living room lights dimmed, brightened, then dimmed again, like someone was playing with a switch. Emily looked up at the ceiling. "Stop," she said quietly. The light steadied. I stared at her. "Stop what?" She shrugged and leaned back into the couch. "He listens." My heart started beating faster. I told myself not to panic. Kids say weird things. Houses make noises. Old wiring exists. But my hands were shaking. When my boyfriend arrived, I felt instant relief. He brought noise with him. Keys, footsteps, his voice filling the space. "See?" he said, grinning. "Totally normal house." As if to mock him, the hallway light flickered again. He glanced at it, then shrugged. "Told you. Wiring." I wanted to believe him. Emily watched him with interest, then smiled and waved. Not at him, but over his shoulder. He didn't notice. I did. "What are you waving at?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She tilted her head. "He's curious about your friend." My boyfriend laughed. "Okay, that's creepy, but kind of funny." I didn't laugh. The house felt different now. Heavier. Like it knew there were more people inside and didn't approve. A door somewhere down the hall closed. Not slammed, closed firmly. My boyfriend frowned. "Okay, that wasn't wiring." Before I could respond, the lights flickered violently. Every lamp, every overhead light. The TV cut out. The house plunged into dim, uneven shadow. Emily remained calm. Too calm. "He doesn't like loud noises," she said softly. "Or strangers." My boyfriend looked at me then, not laughing anymore. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. Another sound followed. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving down the hallway toward us, we both stood. "Emily," I said gently, "come here." She didn't move. "He says you shouldn't be scared," she said. "He says you're just staying for a little while." The footsteps stopped. The house went silent. My boyfriend grabbed my hand. "We need to leave." I looked at Emily. "No," I said, "we can't." I wasn't leaving her alone in that house. The footsteps resumed. This time, closer. My boyfriend swallowed hard. "Call her mom." I did. My voice shook as I explained that something was wrong, that the house was acting strange, that I didn't feel safe. Karen didn't argue. She didn't laugh. "I'm coming home now," she said. "Stay with Emily." While we waited, the house watched. Lights dimmed when we spoke too loudly. The hallway felt crowded when no one stood there. Emily whispered to someone we couldn't see. At one point, she looked straight past me and said, "She's nice." My skin crawled. The front door finally opened just after 11. Karen rushed in, breathless. The moment she crossed the threshold, everything stopped. The lights steadied. The air felt lighter. The house felt empty again. Emily ran to her mom, smiling. As I grabbed my things, Emily hugged me tightly. "He says thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For staying." I didn't babysit after that, and I never went back to that house. But sometimes, when lights flicker for no reason, I still think about how calm Emily was, and how the house only acted when the adults were afraid. The mom handed me the baby monitor like it was a sacred object. Not in a dramatic way, just the way new parents treat anything that stands between them and panic. "It's brand new," she said for the third time that night, adjusting her purse strap and glancing over her shoulder toward the nursery. "We literally just bought it 2 weeks ago. It's the best one. If she makes a sound, you'll know." I nodded, smiling like I wasn't already nervous. I'd babysat plenty of kids before, but babies always made me feel like I was handling something fragile and priceless. Toddlers could tell you what was wrong. Kids could at least point. Babies just existed, and it was your job to read their whole universe from little noises. "Her bottle's done," the dad said, checking his watch. He looked tired in that new parent way, the kind of tired that doesn't go away with one good night of sleep. "If she wakes, just pick her up. She likes being rocked." "Okay," I said. "No problem." The mom exhaled and tried to relax her face into something normal. "We'll be back by 11, maybe a little earlier. It's just dinner." I noticed the way she said "just dinner" like she was trying to convince herself it was allowed. She pointed at the monitor again. "It's simple. Screen on, volume there. Night vision. And see this?" She tapped a small icon on the corner of the display. "It alerts you if it detects sound or motion." "That's cool," I said. "It's comforting," she replied. And then she smiled too quickly. They left a minute later, quiet and careful, like loud goodbyes might wake the baby. The front door clicked shut. The house went still. I stood in the living room, holding the monitor in both hands like I didn't trust myself to set it down. On the screen, the nursery glowed in that soft, grayish night vision. The camera was pointed down at the crib. The baby was there, swaddled and tiny, sleeping like nothing in the world could reach her. The monitor was silent. The little sound indicator sat idle. I told myself it was going to be a calm night. For the first hour, it was. I sat on the couch, half watching a show on low volume and glancing at the monitor every couple of minutes. It became a rhythm. TV, monitor, phone, monitor. My brain trying to stay alert without admitting it was anxious. The nursery looked peaceful. Still. The baby didn't move. At about 9:15, the monitor screen brightened suddenly, and a soft chime sounded. I looked down, startled. A message appeared. Sound detected. The audio channel opened automatically, and I heard it. Breathing. Not crying. Not fussing. Just breathing. At first, it didn't scare me. Babies breathe, obviously. The monitor was supposed to pick up sound, but the breathing was loud, close to the microphone, like whoever was breathing had their mouth near the camera. I stared at the screen. The baby in the crib was still. The tiny rise and fall of her chest was barely noticeable. The breathing I heard was heavier than that. Slower, almost adult. I frowned and leaned forward, volume low so it wouldn't startle the baby through the speaker. Maybe the microphone was sensitive. Maybe it was picking up my own breathing in the living room through some feedback. I held the monitor away from my face. The breathing continued. I stood up and walked closer to the hallway, still watching the screen. The baby remained asleep. The breathing did not change. My throat tightened slightly, but I forced logic back into place. It's picking up something else, I told myself. The vent. The air system. The white noise machine. I remembered the mom mentioning a small white noise device in the nursery meant to soothe the baby. Maybe it was making a low static sound that the monitor interpreted as breathing. But this wasn't static. It was unmistakably a person breathing. In, out, in, out. Then it stopped. The monitor returned to silent mode. The screen dimmed back to its idle brightness like nothing had happened. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the real house. No sounds, no footsteps, no other noise, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant, normal quiet of a suburban night. I laughed softly at myself and went back to the couch. At 9:40, it happened again. The monitor chimed. Motion detected. The screen brightened, audio opened, and there it was. Breathing. This time, it was accompanied by a faint rustling sound, like fabric shifting. My stomach tightened. I stared hard at the nursery view. The baby was still asleep. The angle looked the same. No movement near the crib. Then, the rustling stopped. The breathing continued for another 5 seconds. And then, very softly, I heard something else. A tiny sound, not a voice, not words. A hum. Just a low, gentle tone, like someone humming without melody. I froze. My eyes flicked over the screen for any sign of movement, shadow, blur, anything. Nothing. The baby didn't stir. The hum stopped. The monitor clicked back to silence. I sat there for a long time, not moving, the monitor heavy in my hands. I tried to tell myself a normal explanation. The monitor could be picking up interference from a nearby device, radios, baby monitors from neighbors, someone's TV. But the nursery view was clear. Crisp night vision. No static. No distortion. And the audio sounded like it was coming from inside the nursery, from very close to the camera. I stood and walked to the nursery door. It was closed, as the parents had left it. I rested my hand on the knob and hesitated. Part of me didn't want to open it because opening it would make this real. The other part wanted proof that everything was normal. I turned the knob quietly. The door opened with a soft click. Inside, the room was dim. Nightlight glowing faintly. The white noise machine purring like distant rain. The baby slept peacefully in the crib. I scanned the corners of the room. Nothing. No movement, no objects out of place. I stepped closer to the camera unit mounted near the dresser. A small black device with a glowing indicator light. I leaned in, listening. The room smelled like baby lotion and clean laundry. No breathing besides my own. I backed out slowly, closed the door again, and returned to the living room. I told myself I'd imagined the hum, but I didn't believe it. At 10:05, the monitor turned on by itself again. Sound detected, breathing. This time, it sounded closer than before, which made no sense because the camera hadn't moved. Except, I squinted at the screen. The angle was different. Not dramatically, but enough that my mind registered it. The crib was still in the view, but slightly off-center now, like the camera had been nudged. The top rail appeared closer. The nursery nightlight was more visible. A small star shape on the wall. My skin went cold. The camera unit was supposed to be fixed. I sat up straighter, staring as if my focus could force it to make sense. The baby slept, unmoving. The breathing continued for 10 seconds, then stopped. I waited for the monitor to go silent again. It didn't. The screen stayed bright, the sound channel stayed open. And then I heard something I hadn't heard before. A faint click, like plastic tapping lightly. Then another, rhythmic, like someone tapping a fingernail against the camera casing. I felt my hands go numb. I stared at the screen so hard my eyes watered. The nursery remained still. No shadow passing. No face. Nothing. Just the soft glow of night vision and the baby sleeping like a tiny statue. The tapping stopped. The monitor finally returned to silent mode. I sat there, frozen, heart pounding. I didn't want to call the parents. I didn't want to be the babysitter who overreacted to a fancy monitor doing fancy monitor things. But the camera had moved. I was sure of it. I got up, walked back to the nursery, and opened the door again. Everything looked normal. The camera unit was still sitting on the dresser. But I noticed something. The dresser top had a light layer of dust, barely visible, but there. And the camera unit had a faint smear in the dust beside it, like it had been slid a fraction of an inch. Not much, just enough to shift the angle. I stared at the smear, my stomach turning. No one had been in this room besides me since the parents left. The baby was in the crib, So, what moved the camera? I leaned closer and adjusted it back toward the center. I tightened the little swivel joint until it resisted. I whispered, "Okay." Not to the baby, to the room. Then I stepped out and closed the door again. At 10:20, the monitor stayed quiet. At 10:25, it chimed again. This time, the alert read, "Motion detected. Nursery." My heart jumped. The audio channel opened. Silence at first. Then breathing. And then, through the microphone, I heard a sound that made my whole body tense. A soft creak. The kind of creak you hear when someone shifts their weight on a wooden floor. The baby did not move. The creak came again, slightly louder. Then another. Footsteps. Inside the nursery. My breath caught. I stared at the screen, expecting to see a shadow cross the night vision. Nothing. The image remained clear and still. But the audio was undeniable. Slow footsteps, measured, like someone pacing near the crib. My throat went tight. I stood up quickly and walked toward the nursery door. As I stepped into the hallway, the footsteps stopped. The breathing continued for another few seconds. Then, it stopped too. The monitor went quiet again. I froze halfway down the hall, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. I reached the nursery door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. No footsteps. No breathing. I gripped the knob. Opened the door. The room was still. The baby slept. The white noise machine hummed. The camera indicator light glowed calmly. I stood there in the doorway, scanning the corners again. Nothing. No one. No movement. And yet, the air in the nursery felt occupied. Not colder, not warmer, just heavier, like the room contained someone's attention. I stepped inside slowly and walked to the crib. The baby's face was relaxed, tiny mouth slightly open, peaceful. I leaned in and listened to her breathing. Soft, delicate, not the breathing I'd heard on the monitor. Behind me, the camera unit clicked. I spun around. The camera hadn't moved. But the screen in my hand, still on silent mode, brightened for a split second, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. The monitor wasn't just activating when it detected sound, it was activating when something wanted it to. I backed out of the nursery and closed the door with shaking hands, returned to the living room, sat down, and stared at the monitor like it might bite. My fingers hovered over my phone. Call the parents, call someone. But the fear of sounding crazy kept my thumbs still. So I texted instead, trying to keep it light. Me. Hey, quick question. Has the baby monitor ever turned on by itself? It's been alerting sound/motion a lot, even though she's sleeping. The message sent. I stared at the screen. 5 minutes passed. No reply. I kept watching the monitor, waiting for the next alert like it was an appointment. At 10:42, the monitor turned on. No chime, no alert, it just turned on. The screen brightened. The audio channel opened, and I heard breathing immediately. Slow, steady, close. Then I heard something else. A whisper. Not words I could understand. Just the shape of a whisper. Air pushed through lips, soft and deliberate. My skin went cold. I held the monitor closer, as if being nearer would help me translate it. That whisper continued for 3 seconds, then stopped. The breathing remained. And then the camera angle shifted. Slowly, like someone was rotating it. The nursery view panned slightly to the right. Not jerky, not bumped. Guided. My chest tightened. The crib slid out of the center frame. The camera moved until the view focused on the doorway of the nursery. The door. From the inside. The camera was now aimed straight at the nursery door from within the room, as if whoever controlled it wanted to watch the entrance, as if it expected someone to come in. I felt a wave of dread so strong it made me dizzy. I didn't move. I couldn't. The breathing continued, calm and patient. My phone buzzed suddenly. A text from the mom. Mom. No. It's brand new. It shouldn't do that. Is everything okay? My hands shook as I typed. Me. I think so. It's just been acting weird. The camera angle changed on its own, like it moved. A pause. Then, Mom. That's impossible. It's on a fixed mount. Maybe you bumped it? I stared at the monitor in my lap. The camera was still aimed at the nursery door. The breathing was still audible through the speaker. I forced myself to stand up. I walked to the hallway again, keeping my eyes on the monitor as if it would show me something coming. No more footsteps. No sounds in the real house. Just the monitor breathing. I reached the nursery door and stopped. The camera view showed the door from inside the nursery. It showed me, not my face, but the edge of my shadow in the hallway, cast faintly by the nightlight. My stomach clenched. The breathing quickened slightly as if in anticipation. I stepped back. The camera view remained fixed on the doorway, like it was tracking my presence without moving. I whispered, "No." Then I did the only thing I could think to do. I turned the monitor off. I held the power button until the screen went black. The audio cut out. Silence filled the living room. For a brief moment, I felt relief. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not from the monitor, from somewhere in the house. Soft, steady breathing. Close enough that it sounded like it came from just beyond the living room. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned slowly toward the hallway. The darkness there looked thicker, like the shadows had deepened while I wasn't looking. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it. In, out, in, out. I forced myself to move, not toward the sound, toward the nursery, because the baby was the only thing that mattered. I hurried down the hall, heart racing, and opened the nursery door. The room was still. The baby slept. The white noise machine purred. No breathing besides the gentle sound of the machine and the baby's soft breaths. I stood there shaking, trying to reconcile what I'd just heard. Then the camera unit's indicator light blinked. Once. Twice. Then the camera clicked and rotated slightly toward me, as if acknowledging my presence. I backed away from it and reached down to lift the baby gently, careful not to wake her abruptly. She stirred, made a small noise, then settled against my shoulder. Holding her, made me feel human again. Made the fear feel less abstract. I carried her into the living room, with the nursery door open behind me, refusing to be separated by walls. I sat on the couch with her asleep on my chest, and I called the parents. This time, I didn't text. I didn't worry about sounding dramatic. They answered immediately, both voices in the background, like they were already tense. "Is she okay?" the mom asked. "She's fine," I whispered. "She's asleep, but something is wrong with the monitor. It keeps turning on, and I'm hearing breathing, and the camera moved by itself, like it turned to face the door." There was a pause. Then the dad said carefully, "Did you go into the room and check?" "Yes, multiple times." Another pause. The mom's voice was quieter now. "You're sure you didn't bump it?" "I'm sure," I said, and my voice cracked. And I turned it off, and I heard breathing in the house. Silence on the line. Then the dad said, "We're leaving now. We'll be there in 15 minutes. I held the baby tighter and stared at the hallway. The house stayed quiet for a while. Too quiet. Then, from the nursery, I heard a soft click. Not loud, just the sound of plastic shifting, as if the camera was moving again. I didn't go check. I didn't look down the hallway. I kept my eyes on the front door and kept the baby warm against me. My phone buzzed with a new message from the mom. "Mom, stay in the living room. Don't go back to the nursery. We're almost there." That message hit harder than any sound, because it meant she believed me, or worse, it meant she'd experienced something like this before. I stared at the text, then typed back with shaking fingers. "Me. Has this happened before?" No response. The minutes crawled. Then the front porch light flickered once, then steadied, then flickered again. I kept holding the baby, listening to the quiet. And in that quiet, I heard it, breathing. Again. Not loud, not aggressive, just there. Somewhere between the living room and the hallway. Close enough that it felt like if I turned my head just slightly, I would see someone standing in the doorway. I didn't turn. I kept staring at the front door like it was a lifeline. When headlights finally swept across the front window, I nearly cried from relief. Keys jangled. The front door unlocked. The parents stepped in, rushed and tense. The moment they entered, the breathing stopped. Like a switch had been flipped. The mom's eyes went immediately to the baby on my chest. "Oh, honey," she whispered, rushing over, taking her gently. "She didn't wake," I said, voice shaky. The dad looked past me toward the hallway. His face was tight. "What happened?" he asked again, but this time his tone wasn't skeptical. It was resigned. I explained quickly everything. The alerts, the breathing, the camera angle shifting to face the nursery door, the breathing in the house after I turned off the monitor. The mom held the baby and didn't interrupt. Her face had gone pale. When I finished, she glanced at the dad. He stared at the hallway for a long moment, jaw clenched. Then, he walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the monitor. It was still off. He pressed the power button. The screen came on. The nursery appeared in gray night vision. The camera was aimed at the doorway. Not at the crib. At the doorway. The dad's face tightened. The mom whispered, "It did it again." He didn't respond. He walked toward the nursery, monitor in hand, and I followed a few steps behind without thinking. He pushed the nursery door open. The room looked normal. Crib, nightlight, white noise machine. He walked to the camera unit on the dresser and stared at it. Then, without touching it, the camera rotated slightly toward him. A small, smooth movement, like it was tracking. The dad didn't flinch. He just turned the camera off at the base. He yanked the plug from the wall. The indicator light went dark. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the baby monitor in his hand, still powered on, displayed a message. Signal lost. And beneath it, for a brief second, another line flickered into place. Not a standard message, not something the brand would ever program. Just 2 words, in blocky, glitched text. Don't look. The screen went black. The dad's hand tightened around the unit. "Okay," he said quietly. The mom stared at the dark screen like it might wake up again. "We're returning it tomorrow." Neither of them laughed. Neither of them tried to explain it away. The mom turned to me, voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for calling us." I nodded, throat too tight to speak. The dad walked past us into the hallway and stopped by a small closet. He opened it and pulled out a second baby monitor. Older, simpler, the kind with no screen. He held it up and said quietly, not to me, but to his wife, "We should have used this one." The mom's eyes dropped. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked before I could stop myself. They both froze. The dad looked at me, and for a second I thought he might lie. But he didn't. He said softly, "Because it only happens when we leave her with someone else." My blood went cold. "What happens?" The mom swallowed. The monitor, the angle, the sounds. She looked at the nursery door, then back at me. "We thought it was interference. Or anxiety." "And the message?" I whispered. The dad's face tightened. "We never saw a message before." He put the broken monitor in a kitchen drawer like he was hiding a weapon. Then he looked at me and said, "I'll drive you home." On the ride back, neither of us spoke much. When he dropped me off, he didn't try to make it feel normal. He didn't say, "Probably nothing." He just said, "Thanks again," in a voice that sounded like it hurt. I went inside my house and turned on all the lights. That night, I put my phone face down on my nightstand because I couldn't stand the thought of a screen turning on by itself. And even now, whenever I hear soft breathing in a quiet room, whether it's a vent or wind or someone sleeping nearby, I feel my body tighten because I remember how calm that breathing was, how patient, how close, and how the last thing it wanted wasn't to be seen. It wanted to be noticed. I noticed the basement door the moment I walked in. It wasn't because it looked creepy. At first, it was because everything else in the house looked so normal. Warm lighting, family photos, shoes lined up by the entryway, a bowl of candy on the kitchen counter like it was perpetually October. The door was in the hallway just off the kitchen, painted the same beige as the walls. But the paint was older there, slightly scuffed around the knob. The frame looked thicker than the others, like the house had been built around that door instead of the door being added later. The dad, Mike, was giving me quick instructions while shrugging into a jacket. The mom, Sarah, stood at the sink rinsing a cup, already halfway mentally out the door. "Kids 8, Mike said. "No allergies. Bedtime at 9. They can watch a movie as long as it's not scary." Sarah wiped her hands and smiled apologetically. "They're easy. Honestly, you'll have a quiet night." The kids, Ben and Hallie, were in the living room. Ben was 8 and acted older when adults were around. Hallie was 5, in pajamas already, small and curious, watching me like I was a new character in her world. I'd babysat for them twice before. Normal kids, normal house, normal neighborhood. That's why I didn't think much of the basement door at first. I only thought, that's probably where they keep holiday decorations and old baby stuff. Mike grabbed his keys. "We'll be back around 11. Text if you need anything." Sarah hesitated like she always did, then leaned toward Hallie. "Be good, okay? Listen to her." Hallie nodded. Ben barely looked away from the TV. They left in a hurry, the front door clicking shut behind them. The house went quiet in that familiar after parents leave way, like the building exhaled. I walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. "Okay," I said brightly. "Movie night?" Ben shrugged. "Can we watch the one with the talking dog?" Hallie bounced. "Yes!" I put it on. The kids settled in with blankets. The lights in the living room were warm and soft. The house felt fine. Then I heard the first sound, a dull, low thump. Not from the living room, from beneath my feet. I paused, listening. Ben didn't react. Hallie didn't react. The movie kept playing with cheerful music. I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses creak and thunk. Pipes shift. Heat vents pop. Still, I glanced toward the hallway where the basement door was. It sat there, quietly, unchanged. I looked away and focused on the movie. A few minutes later, the sound came again. Thump. Followed by something softer, like a scrape. Hallie's eyes drifted toward the hallway for a second, then back to the TV. Ben didn't move. I leaned forward slightly. "Did you guys hear that?" Ben shrugged. "Yeah." "What was it?" He said it casually, like he was answering what time it was. "That's downstairs." I laughed a little, because it sounded silly. "Downstairs where?" Ben pointed with his chin toward the hallway. "Basement." Hallie nodded without looking up. "He's moving." My smile stiffened. "Who's moving?" Hallie's voice stayed small and calm. "The man." Ben didn't correct her. He didn't roll his eyes, he just kept watching the movie. I felt my stomach tighten. "Wait," I said carefully. "What man?" Hallie shrugged like it was obvious. "The one who sleeps down there." I stared at her. It's amazing how quickly your brain tries to normalize things to protect you. In a split second, I thought, maybe they have an older relative living with them. Maybe a grandpa. Maybe they rent out a basement apartment. But I'd been in the kitchen. I'd been in the hallway. I hadn't seen a second entrance or a separate unit. and when the parents gave me instructions, they hadn't mentioned anyone else in the house. Ben noticed my face and finally looked over. "It's fine," he said. "He doesn't come up." "Who is he?" I asked, trying not to sound like I was panicking. Ben shrugged again. "I don't know. He's just downstairs." Hallie giggled softly, still watching the movie. "Sometimes he's loud." My throat went dry. I stood up slowly, trying to keep my movements calm so I wouldn't scare them. "Okay," I said lightly. "I'm going to get you guys some water." I walked into the kitchen, but I wasn't thinking about water. I was thinking about the basement door, thinking about why the parents wouldn't mention another person in the house. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the kids were playing a game. Maybe they'd heard sounds before and invented a man to explain them. I poured water anyway, just to have something normal to do. And while I stood at the sink, I heard it again, clearer now. A slow creak. Not pipes, not heating vents. It sounded like someone shifting weight on wooden stairs. My hands tightened around the cup. The kitchen light flickered once, just a blink, then steady again. I looked toward the hallway. The basement door remained closed, locked. I could see the small brass chain lock at the top of it, something you don't usually see on a basement door, like a second layer, like someone wanted to make sure it stayed shut. I carried the water back to the living room and handed it to the kids. They drank like nothing was wrong. I sat down again, but I couldn't focus on the movie anymore. Every part of me was listening, waiting for the next sound. It came 10 minutes later. This time, it wasn't a thump. It was a series of soft sounds. 3, then a pause, then 2 more. Like footsteps, like someone walking slowly across a basement floor. I swallowed hard. Hallie leaned toward Ben and whispered, "He's awake." Ben hushed her, but not in a scared way. In an annoyed way, like she was talking during the movie. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled my phone out and texted Sarah. Me. "Hey, quick question. Are there any noises I should expect from the basement? I'm hearing some sounds, and Hallie said something about a man downstairs." The typing bubble didn't appear right away. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, waiting. Another sound rose from beneath the floor. Something like a slow drag, like furniture shifting a few inches. My skin prickled. I stood up. Ben looked at me. "Bathroom?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just a second." Instead of going to the bathroom, I went to the hallway. The basement door sat at the end, beige paint, scuffed knob, chain lock at the top. I approached it carefully, like it might bite. I listened. At first, nothing. Then a faint sound, so soft I could have imagined it. Breathing. Not loud, not raspy. Just the subtle rise and fall of air moving in a space that shouldn't have been close enough for me to hear. My stomach dropped. I stepped back, pulse racing. My phone buzzed. Sarah texted back. "Sarah. Oh, sorry. Old house. Pipes and stuff. The kids get weird ideas. Don't worry about it." My mouth went dry. That wasn't an answer. It wasn't even a denial. It was a dismissal, dressed up with a smiley face. I typed back with shaking fingers. "Me. Are you sure? It really sounds like someone moving down there." A minute passed. Then another. In the living room, the kids laughed at the movie. The normalcy of it felt wrong now, like they were laughing in a place that didn't deserve laughter. My phone buzzed again. Sarah. Yes, we've lived here a long time. It's just noises. We'll be home soon. I stared at the message. We've lived here a long time. Not, there's no one downstairs. Not, there's no basement apartment. Not, the kids are imagining it. Just, it's noises. I backed away from the door and returned to the living room, trying to steady my breathing. The kids didn't seem scared. If anything, Hallie looked calmer now, like the sounds from below soothed her. That made it worse. At 8:40, the lights flickered again. All of them, at once. Living room lamp, kitchen lights spilling in from the doorway, the TV dimming briefly before brightening again. Ben paused the movie and looked at me. Did you do that? He asked, suspicious. No, I said quickly. Probably. The power. Hallie's gaze drifted past me toward the hallway. She smiled. Hi, she said quietly. My blood went cold. Ben didn't react, like he didn't hear her, or like he was used to it. What did you say? I whispered. Hallie blinked at me. Nothing. She went back to the movie, thumb in her mouth. I sat frozen, watching her. The house felt heavier now, the air thick and still. The kind of stillness that comes before storm. Or before something decides to move. At 8:55, I told the kids it was bedtime. Ben groaned, but complied. Hallie didn't argue. She climbed off the couch and padded down the hallway toward their bedrooms, small and sleepy. As we passed the basement door, Hallie slowed. She leaned slightly toward it, as if listening. Then she whispered, very clearly, "Shh, we're going upstairs." I stopped walking. Ben kept going, rolling his eyes. I caught up to them and ushered them into the bedroom. Their room was shared. 2 small beds, stuffed animals, nightlight glowing. I tucked Hallie in first. She yawned and settled immediately. Ben climbed into bed with the practiced movements of a kid who's done it 1,000 times. "Can you leave the door open?" Hallie asked. "Sure," I said. Though I didn't want to, I wanted all doors closed now. I wanted barriers. I left it cracked and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. From below, the basement made a sound. A slow creak, like a foot on the first stair. My heart hammered. I forced myself not to run. Running would make me loud. Loud felt like an invitation. I walked back to the living room and sat down, phone clutched in my hand. I didn't turn the TV back on. The silence was better than cheerful noise pretending things were fine. In the quiet, the sounds below became clearer. A step, then another. Slow, measured. And then a faint rattle. From the basement door. Not the knob. Higher. The chain lock. I stared at the hallway. The chain rattled again, lightly, like someone testing it with fingertips. Hallie's voice drifted from the bedroom, sleepy and calm. "He wants to come up." I felt my throat close. I stood up, legs shaking, and walked quickly to the kids' room. Hallie's eyes were half closed. Ben looked annoyed. "Hallie," I whispered. "What do you mean?" She blinked slowly. "He wants to see." Ben groaned. "She says that sometimes." "Sometimes?" I repeated, voice thin. Ben shrugged. "It's just the basement." I wanted to press him, wanted details. But the kids were tired, and I was terrified of scaring them. I forced myself to smile and stroked Hallie's hair. "Okay," I whispered. "Go to sleep." I closed their door a little more than she wanted. Still cracked, but less. Then I went back down the hall, keeping my eyes fixed on the basement door. The chain lock rattled again. And then, very softly, the doorknob turned. Not a full turn, just enough to test the latch. My entire body went cold. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off it. My phone buzzed again. Sarah. On our way. 10 minutes. 10 minutes felt like a lifetime. I texted back, fingers fumbling. "Me. Please hurry, the basement door's moving." No response. The basement went quiet. Too quiet, and that silence didn't feel like relief. It felt like waiting. Like whatever was down there had decided it didn't need to make noise anymore. I stood in the living room, phone in hand, staring at the hallway. My eyes kept flicking to the basement door, expecting it to open, expecting a footstep on the stairs, expecting a shape to appear. Nothing happened. Minutes crawled. Then, at 9:17, the hallway light dimmed, slowly, not flickering, like someone was lowering it with an invisible dial. The bulb glowed weaker and weaker until it was barely a candlelight glow. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, from pure fear. I whispered, "Please stop." The light held. Then it brightened again, returning to normal as if it had never changed, as if it had heard me. My phone buzzed at 9:22. Mike. Pulling in now. Relief hit me so hard my knees weakened. I heard the front door unlock. Voices, keys. The familiar noise of adults returning to a house. The moment they stepped inside, the pressure lifted. The air became normal again, like the house remembered how to behave. Sarah smiled at me, shrugging off her coat. "Everything okay?" I stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. Then I forced out, "Your basement door is locked from the outside." Her smile faltered just slightly, like a muscle twitch. "Oh," she said lightly. "Yeah, we just keep it locked. Kids, you know." "But they said someone sleeps down there," I blurted. Mike laughed, too quickly. "Kids say weird stuff." I looked past them, toward the hallway. The basement door sat quietly, chain lock still in place. No movement, no sound, as if it had never tried to turn the knob. Ben came out of the bedroom, sleepy, rubbing his eyes. Sarah kissed his head. "Hey, buddy." Hallie appeared behind him, hair messy, clutching a stuffed animal. She looked at me with that calm, knowing expression again. "Did he go back to sleep?" she asked. Sarah stiffened. Mike's face tightened for a fraction of a second. Then Sarah smiled at Hallie too brightly. Yes, honey, everyone's asleep. Hallie nodded, satisfied. She turned to me as I grabbed my jacket. He doesn't, like, when you talk about him, she whispered. My stomach dropped. Sarah laughed awkwardly. She has an imagination. But her eyes didn't meet mine. I left quickly, and as I walked out the front door, I heard something behind me. A soft, final rattle from inside the house, like someone touching the chain lock one last time, not trying to open it, just reminding me it was there. Some houses don't reveal themselves right away. They wait until the parents are gone, until the lights are low, and until the person in charge isn't old enough to know what they're dealing with. Tonight's stories weren't about monsters in the dark. They were about trust. Trusting locked doors, familiar routines, and devices meant to keep children safe. Because sometimes the most unsettling thing isn't what you see. It's what stays calm while you're afraid. Thank you, Midnight members, for spending part of your night with me. If you enjoyed episode 11, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who loves realistic horror, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. Your support truly means everything, and it helps keep Mr. Bones' Midnight Society going. Before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever babysat in a house that felt wrong? Until next time, lock the doors, trust your instincts, and if the monitor turns on by itself, don't look. Sleep well, if you can.